All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Just welcome is all I want to say. Thank you everybody for joining today. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I've been in data for really quite some time, used a lot of different data tools. Was introduced to ORMs a couple of years ago, but when I saw jOOQ and what this is, it opened up my eyes to a wholly different way of actually interacting with the database. And we're really excited to have Lukas join us today. And honestly, I'm really excited to have my friend Jordan join us today as well on this stream. Jordan streams every week on Friday, I believe, but we'll talk about that in a second. But first of all, welcome everybody for coming. It is literally 5 a.m. here. So sorry if my machine is even slow to start today. So today's session is kind of beginner immediate. We're not going to get too deep into any architectural concepts, but we're definitely going to show some code. We're going to talk about jOOQ, and we're having a great conversation. If you have questions, you have comments, please do use the chat or the QA in the Zoom platform that we're on today. But I know it's on YouTube as well. So if you have questions there, just dump them into the chat there. I know JP will help get the questions into the team here. The recording will be available. It's pretty much immediate afterwards on our YouTube channel, the Cockroach Labs YouTube channel. So if anybody wants to know that. But again, if you have any questions along the way and you want to take part in the conversation, God, by all means, join and throw something into the chat or the QA or wherever you want to be. And I'll make sure to help the team see the questions. So, all right. Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat. All right, so Lukas and Jordan, do you guys want to join me here on live online with your beautiful faces? There we go. Thanks, Jordan. Hey, Lukas. Good morning. Good afternoon, Lukas. Good morning, Jordan.
Hi. Good morning.
So y'all, I'm joined by Lukas and Jordan, both of them incredible engineers in their own right. But Lukas, do you want to just give a quick introduction of yourself, just to give a level set with everybody?
Sure. I'm Lukas, founder of Data Geekery, the company behind jOOQ. I used to work in the Java ecosystem for a long time. Before I started this company, I was in the e-banking field in Switzerland. Developed a lot of stuff with Oracle SQL, very much in depth with a lot of tuning as well. This is something I really like to do. And eventually I made jOOQ, and I think we're going to go deeper into that later on.
I think we're going to have a lot of conversation about jOOQ today also. That's for sure. Lukas, your picture looks like you right now. Do you have do you use this at home as well? Is the microphone?
Yeah, that's how my wife knows me as well, with the microphone.
And then Jordan, can you give a quick introduction as well?
Sure. I'm Jordan Lewis. I'm Director of Engineering for the SQL organization, SQL layer at Cockroach Labs. I've been working at the company since 2016 when I joined as an engineer. I've been doing management lately, but I still love the engineering side of things. And Jim mentioned up top that I do a stream as well. I'll plug that just for a second since you mentioned it. So if you are interested in internals of CockroachDB, I hope that you will join me every Friday 3 p.m. on Twitch, which is my stream platform of choice, at twitch.tv large data bank, where we talk about how CockroachDB is built, how SQL is built on the inside.
Right on. And honestly, y'all, that's a pretty incredibly useful stream. Jordan, it's hands-on code. You're hands-on coding most of the time, right, Jordan? So, and I think it's pretty. Jordan can be pretty entertaining, I gotta say. Jordan, so are you 6 years at Cockroach Labs?
Yeah, I've been working at the company for 6 years. It sounds like a lot.
That's amazing. My 3.5 feels like a lifetime. I can only imagine like the 2 lifetimes of yours. So, yeah. So it come a long way. And y'all, Jordan, Jordan has built a lot of what's in Cockroach database. Up and down. I know you focus on the SQL side of things right now, Jordan, but you've been instrumental in designing and building a lot of what's in Cockroach database today. For me, probably one of the coolest products I've had the pleasure or the honor to actually go out and talk about. So I just get to talk about the cool things that people like Jordan builds. I don't know. It's easy for me, I guess. Although I get to be a translator, I got to take those complex things and Make it simple. So y'all, this is just conversation today. There is no slides. Gosh, I hate slides unless I have to have them. But we are definitely going to do some hands-on coding and whatnot, or you're going to see some, I'm not thanking people yet. So let me stop sharing so you could see faces. Okay. So Lukas, let's just start at the beginning. The simplest question, I think, kind of, what is jOOQ? How do you describe this?
So the simplest answer to this is that jOOQ is an internal domain-specific language, which models the SQL language directly in Java, which essentially means that you can write SQL statements and programs directly in Java code, and the Java compiler will compile them for you type safely, and it will get syntax errors if you do something wrong, if you have the wrong tables, the wrong columns, or even the wrong SQL syntax. And it runs that query for you on top of JDBC or R2DBC. And you get the results via jOOQ. So it's kind of like an ORM, but much more SQL oriented, not lower level. It's just different. So you have SQL in the middle of everything.
Yeah. And how long has jOOQ been around, Lukas?
I started it in 2009, and it's been a commercial product, dual licensed commercial product since 2013. So it's been a long time now.
Where were you when I was still coding?
I don't know. When were you still coding?
I think I stopped somewhere around 2007, 2008.
Oh.
Like I went full time, like full bore. Like I was just like,
yeah, I should have been there. So you would still code today, right?
Well, it's
just
like
ships in the night, you guys just miss each other.
I wish this was there like 10, 20 years ago. Cause like, seriously, like the whole SQL, you had to learn 2 languages in the past. Like you had this weird like SQL thing. And then, I don't know, I coded in, my first language was Smalltalk, y'all, which is like, I think, the most beautiful language of all time. But
it is nice.
It is. It was great.
You know what? I just want to mention what's so cool up front, just listening to your very high level description of jOOQ, is that giving developers the power of using their ordinary language and their ordinary mode of thinking to understand whether their queries are going to work. That's just fantastically powerful. Having the opportunity to notice, your IDE tells you when your query doesn't make any sense. That's just so cool. And how does that work exactly? Like, how does jOOQ know what SQL is valid and what tables are there in your schema?
So there are 2 parts to your question. The first thing is, what is valid SQL? And that's part of the internal domain-specific language. So the whole SQL language is mapped to Java interfaces that return Java interfaces, which return more Java interfaces, and each interface has methods like select, from, where, and you can never get it wrong. So whenever you do auto-completion, I will show some examples soon after, you can get auto-completion on all the syntax, and you can't get it wrong. And the tables and columns are supported via a code generator, which is run as part of your build. You can also run it manually, but it's usually run as part of the build. It reverse engineers your actual CockroachDB database to which it connects, and it reads the information schema and the PG catalog tables and generates Java classes with type information associated with them. So you will know that the ID column is of type long in Java or integer or whatever, and you can query that directly. So if you mistype your column, it's just an ordinary Java field. You won't have compilable code.
I have to say, that's the dream. People have been talking a lot about developer experience in the industry conversation as of late. And I think that this kind of thing is the way to leapfrog the questions of what is the developer experience, just to let's just get the entire thing done. Like let's put the entire experience of writing queries and interacting with the database into the same language that people use every day. So I think it's just really fantastic. And Java, what's so great about Java is that it just gives you this maturity, right? It's like this tool's been around for so long. The tools are so powerful, like the stuff that you're building, the fact that you can kind of get this stuff into your IDE in a seamless way, I think is something that people probably underestimate about Java in 2022.
Yeah, especially if you get the IDE support. So, but not just Java. In fact, also Scala and Kotlin did a tremendous job at interoperability. So the same Java API, since jOOQ is written in Java, can be used seamlessly in Kotlin as well, or in Scala. So that's really tremendous.
Well, Jordan, this is the whole thing. Like I don't want to learn 2 languages. I want to use one. right? And I think that simplicity and the beauty of being able to actually harness the power of what is a relational database, but natively in your own language, to me, to me, that's the most compelling part of this entire thing, honestly, Lucas. It's really, like you said, Jordan, it's extremely powerful.
On the other hand, it still is SQL, so it's just a different dialect of SQL, different way to write it, but the syntax is almost the same. So it's not like jOOQ invented something entirely new to query the database. It's really, I think some other APIs tried that in various languages to have a more idiomatic, even more idiomatic flow. So you don't have keywords like select, from, and where, but different ones. But jOOQ really opted to, if you have this SQL statement in your mind, and you know you want to write this window function, you just translate it to jOOQ API, and it's the same thing.
That's great.
So you're still going to have to learn the second language a little bit, I guess.
So Lucas, I feel like this was built out of necessity or convenience. Was it, or was it one or the other, or kind of both?
Yeah, kind of both. So I told you before, I worked in the e-banking field, and even before I worked at a consultancy company in Zurich, Switzerland. And everywhere I worked, I always saw people were creating query builders. So everyone wanted to have this option of writing dynamic SQL or even dynamic Hibernate query language, whatever, just because if you have some UI and you have some buttons and you can click, you dynamically assemble the predicates of your query, the where clause. And everyone invented this real afresh, because there's not really anything at the time. There wasn't really anything that solved these problems. Hibernate is something simple at the time, but it wasn't very powerful. So these coworkers of mine already built these things, and I started maintaining them because I found the topic really interesting. Then I switched company, and they had the same thing but different, you know, and it always could do kind of select, from, where, maybe group by, but certainly not join, and unions and whatever. So these things really were very simple, and they were built by someone in the team, and maybe even different teams at the same thing. So the necessity was there. I already saw that everyone wanted to have a query builder, but no one built a really good one at the time. So I started doing my own. I always wanted to do that in the companies as well, but they said, "Oh, Lucas, we already have one."
Yeah, Lucas, I need you to focus on the business problem. Stop doing this. You know, I've been there. The beauty of it's funny. Like I joke sometimes, but I gave up on the document model somewhere around XML, I think, because I don't know. The way I was trained was always the relational model. I think the beauty and the math behind the relational model, I think, is it's incredible, right? And I think the relational database is pretty powerful. How much of the syntax of the relational database does jOOQ actually deliver on, Lucas? Because to me, it's extremely powerful. The relational database. I mean, it deals with a lot of things that I think a lot of like current developers don't think about sometimes, and they have to do things in code, right? So how much of the syntax is actually there?
It's never going to be complete, obviously. So for instance, some years ago, jOOQ started developing, adding DDL syntax, like create table, alter table, drop table, and all these things, and abstracts away the little differences between the vendors. But in terms of, for instance, what you need for select, jOOQ really has a ton of features. This includes arcane syntaxes like connect by that you have in Informix or Oracle, or like in the Postgres family of database products, you have on conflict clause with various sub clauses like the where clause and on conflict, and jOOQ supports all of that. And in case you wouldn't run the query all the time on Postgres, jOOQ can translate that to a standard SQL merge statement. So merge is also supported with all the gimmicks like the matching and additional predicates. So I don't know if you're much aware of merge. I don't think CockroachDB already supports it. Standard SQL merge, I don't think so.
Oh, SQL merge, yeah. So that's like the new kind of standard syntax for like an upsert kind of thing, right? Or not?
Yeah,
really?
yeah. It's not just upsert. So I think in terms of upsert, the Postgres syntax that you folks also copied is much more simple and intuitive. So I really like on conflict for these kinds of things. Merge is really powerful. So you can insert, update, delete all in one go. It's really, really very, very powerful.
I probably should look into that. That sounds
So you will have it before Postgres then.
I've actually got a question. So I have two questions. One is to come back. We were just talking about, wow, SQL is so powerful. And, I think that lately, Jim, you kind of alluded to this, but do developers today know the power of SQL? Somebody I followed tweeted that SQL is a dying art. And I think that this wasn't something that they were happy about. They were kind of sad about it. And I guess to me, it makes me scared if people think like, oh no, current developers aren't understanding just how powerful SQL can really be. Current developers are spending too much time writing code in their IDEs, duplicating complicated functionality that the database can do. So I guess my question to you, Lukas, is do you see this in your world? And how can jOOQ bring the power of SQL into people's hands who maybe haven't done as much studying of the relational model in SQL today in the 2020s?
Yeah, it's kind of ironic. I mean, you said SQL is a dying art. I've recently tweeted again that it's ironic because in the 90s, when SQL was kind of a hype, so SQL is even older than the 90s, but it was really hyped in the 90s. Optimizers were actually quite bad still, but everyone was using SQL even when they shouldn't have.
That's
even
right.
when writing the algorithm manually might have been faster. And now the optimizers are really, really good, and people have kind of started abandoning SQL in the past 20 years. Although I think there's kind of a renaissance since recently, even a few NoSQL vendors have started implementing at least parts of the SQL language. So less the relational model as a complete thing, but the SQL language itself can also be used in non-relational contexts because it's just such a powerful way and such an ubiquitous way of interacting with data. Some database vendors have started embracing it even for JSON databases. Which is not really a conflict. So even CockroachDB also has Postgres's JSON extensions where you can nest collections in a JSON array and objects, and it's not really a contradiction. So SQL might be a dying art. I don't know what the reasons are. And one of the reasons is that you kind of lose control over the algorithm, and some folks kind of don't trust this for whatever reason, or they don't even imagine what the optimizer can do for them. I wish it wasn't like that. I mean, seriously, I would never want to write those stupid algorithms myself.
No,
I mean,
definitely not.
Every time you have to decide whether you want to nested loop join or hash join, that's just brain cycles that you were wasting that the database can do much better than you.
Absolutely
right?
true.
That's just join algorithms, right?
I think that SQL, it shouldn't be a dying art. It's like I'm obviously right there with you. And I think I view it part of my job and my mission to make SQL the obvious choice. SQL is so powerful. It's so cool. People should deserve to understand this power. And I think what's so cool about jOOQ, just like I was saying up top with developer experience, like just the ability to kind of learn SQL by trying. I feel like so many languages and concepts and tools these days allow you to start using them without having to take a course on them, right? It's like, oh, you can play around, like touch the API calls. Like, it's like get some autocomplete. And that's exactly what you're doing with jOOQ. So I think that's just really so fantastic.
That's what I've been telling at conference talks in the past about API design. So one aspect that is really important in API design is discoverability. So some people really like to read the whole manual from start to end, but I'm not like that. If I have something new, I want to just start discovering stuff and see what's possible, play around. And autocompletion is a very wonderful tool for that.
Absolutely.
As you say, so if it's embedded in Java or Kotlin or whatever, you can just start and discover, as you say.
So I've got one more question, and it's kind of related to something that Michael is asking in the chat. So earlier you were talking about kind of how jOOQ gives you this power that actually transcends the database dialect.
How it works technically.
Right. And somebody was asking, how sustainable is it for you, Lukas, to translate something like merge into replacement constructs in databases that don't have it, for example? And I have sort of a similar question, which is, what is it like for you to have to deal with all of these funny inconsistencies across the different databases? As somebody who's writing one, I understand that there's a lot of choices that you have to make. There's a lot of variety out there in the market. Yeah. So I'm sort of just wondering what your experience has been doing this translation layer.
So how it works technically, when you build a jOOQ query, you're actually building an expression tree. You just don't see it, but it's not the usual syntax when you build expression trees where you have a heavily nested construct and then you see the tree structure, you just create the SQL query, but behind the scenes, you're actually building this expression tree for jOOQ. in a SQL-esque syntax, and jOOQ maintains this expression tree and traverses it to generate a SQL string for it, for the dialect that you've chosen. And this expression tree can be traversed in any way. So when you have a function like, let's say inster in Oracle, and you want to translate that to CockroachDB's substring or a position. Now inster is position, so you want to translate that. You can just decide, okay, I have this node in my tree, and it's a position node, and it was parsed as inster for Oracle, and now I want to render it as position in CockroachDB. So it's not really a lot of magic, it's just a lot of code. So every little feature has to be translated in all the different dialects that are supported, if it's possible. So usually it is, especially for functions. Sometimes it isn't, so that's a bummer. Then if you want to use merge, as we've discussed before, merge is a really complicated statement that can't be emulated easily if you don't have merge, but the other way around is possible. So upsert can be emulated with merge because merge is more powerful. And now the second question, how does that make me feel? I mean, luckily for CockroachDB, you've chosen the Postgres syntax to be compatible with, which is very close to the SQL standard. And I personally think it's a really beautiful way of interacting with the SQL language. It's very concise, it's very logical. I've seen entirely different beasts that I wouldn't describe like that. I won't call names now, but anyway, so some things are really weird. I have to implement the weirdest kind of hacks to make the most basic syntax work. I think I'll show an example. For instance, when you have a table and you want to rename the table and all the columns, that is really simple in CockroachDB, just like in Postgres. You just have a derived column list. It's the syntax, which I'll show later. And for instance, in Oracle, you have to do this huge union query to make sure you can rename both table and column.
Well, cool, you guys. Let's get on to let's show it, Lukas. I mean, we've been,
Yeah, sure.
That's what I do. You guys, I talk. You guys code. Let's just show code.
Right. So can you guys see it now?
Yes. Oh, that's great.
All right. So let's talk about the actual code. So here I set up some IntelliJ project with a couple of queries. I have the CTX object here, which is the jOOQ DSL context object, which I set up in this abstract demo here. You can download this code from GitHub. I'll share the link later on. And you can see how it works. It connects to a CockroachDB database with a JDBC. So the underlying connection is always JDBC driven. Then it has some configuration that you use to set up the CTX object. You can do that with Spring Boot, of course. In the example, I did manually, but you can use any platform like Spring Boot to do this. So back to the example, I just run this query here. I can click on this button here to run. It's not really a test, it's just a query. And then you see in the debug log, you see what is actually being executed. I have this select one query here. I call fetch on it, and fetch is a blocking action that runs the query on JDBC. So in the debug log, by default, we see what is generated, what is sent to CockroachDB, and what CockroachDB sends back to us. So it's a simple result set with just one row and one column. So that's that. That's not very interesting, it's just to show how it's set up. So here we have an actual query. So we have the CTX object, which has a select clause, and here actor is the generated object actor. So you see when you get into that, you see all the tables here, actor, address, category, city, which is from the Sakila database. So some of you might be aware of this database. It's a sample database originally developed by MySQL, which has a DVD rental store modeled in it. So I don't know if all the audience still remember what DVDs are, but it's kind of a dying art as well. But anyway, so we have actors and films, etc. So we can type here actor, and then you see auto completion. You see all the columns in the actor table. You can say last name, first name, whatever. And you see also the type safety. So this actor, first name, last name has a type associated with it. You see it's a type string in the actor record. I could place actor ID here, and now the whole query doesn't compile anymore because I'm expecting a long string column, right? So the compiler says I have to have a string record, and I'm now getting a long string record. So this means the whole query doesn't compile anymore. Or also if I mistype the column, so if someone in the team renames the column, this code will no longer compile, right? So you have the ID support, you have the compiler support. I'll put it back to first name, which was the version that worked. And then I have the from clause, the where clause, the order by clause, just like you write the actual SQL statement. Also, you can't reorder these. It doesn't make sense to have where and then from. This just doesn't compile, right? So because the where clause, if you write that, you have a type that is returned from it, and the type has more types, etc. And there's no from method in them anymore. So the from method has to go first. And I can run this query as well. So when I run this query, we'll see the results from this database. So you see an example query. It's being printed out here. Also with bind variables in line, if you want to see the value of the bind variable in the debug log, by default, you can see this. It's very useful for debugging, I think. And then the first 5 results. So you can get started very easily. So this is exactly once more the developer experience, which I also think is very important. Obviously, we will turn this off in production because it's a lot of debug logging. But when you start working with jOOQ, you can immediately see what's going on behind the scenes, what jOOQ is doing behind the scenes, even if I'm not even consuming this record.
That is super cool. Just using the Java type system to help you here. It's just so good. I feel like I've said that 5 times, but it really is fantastic.
And now it goes further, right? So I've called fetch, which runs the query and produces this result. And I can just use the for each loop in Java because the result query in jOOQ is an iterable. So I can let me hide this. So the iterable type can be used in a for each loop. So the only thing this could ever mean is just the same thing as in PGPL SQL. When you write a store procedure in a loop, you want to iterate the query and get record by record. So this is what happens here. When I put the query in the loop inside of here, it's getting executed. And I'm getting this type here. I use var now because the other type was kind of unwieldy, but I can type it explicitly. It's a record with 2 columns of type string, right? So I can access these by index here. This is just one option in a type safe way and print all the actors. I can even use the iterable for each method. It's just exactly the same thing. I just can call for each on any query and iterate the results of the query. So I can run this again. So I'll see the results in the logs. Right. There are various ways of consuming results. I won't go through every one of them. Maybe some of the audience have questions. I won't show all of it, but I want to quickly jump to some more type safety here when we write unions. Everyone knows in SQL, if you have unions, you have subqueries. So the first subquery will be this one, and the second subquery will be this one, and they must match, right, by index. So I can't just remove this column and think this is still correct SQL. Now it doesn't compile anymore because the first subquery has 2 columns, the second subquery only has 1 column. This is invalid SQL in SQL, and it's also invalid in jOOQ. You see the compiler error says that you actually had record 2 string expected, but you provided record 1 string, and you can kind of debug. I mean, if you have 50 columns, it's harder to debug, but in this case, it's quite obvious what went wrong. And I can also not just use the last update column here. Right, I can't use this column as well because that's of type whatever local date time. I can't compare that with the string, so it's not correct. Right, so
super cool stuff.
Again, where were you when I was coding? Like hours of time debugging these things, Lucas. Like,
yeah, I know.
Like, I'm sitting here like grunting, going, "Oh God, oh that's awesome."
And you have to imagine it doesn't just happen because you're doing the wrong typing when you write the query, but maybe someone decides the last name or whatever is now a new type. To change the type from some string type to some number type, and now they will immediately see all the queries that break, right? So they don't have to wait until tests or production for the query to break because it breaks right away. They shouldn't be even able to compile their code anymore. Right?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So tell me how this works with schema changes. Obviously, a big part of a application lifecycle is figuring out when to add schema changes or do the migrations. How do you, there's going to be dev environment, test environment, prod. It gets complicated. So I'm sort of wondering how you think about versioning your code with your schema in jOOQ.
So jOOQ doesn't offer a solution to this, but it integrates nicely with the existing solutions. For instance, Flyway or Liquibase are the most popular ones in the Java ecosystem. So I really strongly recommend you use formal database change management, like, as I said, Flyway or Liquibase. They're equivalent, in my opinion. One of them is completely text-based, and the other one has an XML or JSON or YAML format for the migrations, and you check in those changes. So you write the delta in that language, in whatever language it is, and you check it in, and it will become part of your code. So your schema, at least, is part of your code. Maybe not the data, but the schema. And then once you have that, you run a migration during your build, and right after the migration, you can run the jOOQ code generation, and then only then you start running your tests, right? So your tests will then depend on the new schema, the migrated schema, and maybe they will not even compile. So you detect all of these things right away, and then this is the process that I would really recommend doing.
That makes a lot of sense. And when you generate the schema specific code in jOOQ, do you like people to version that along with their code, or is that sort of just an artifact that sits in the build directory?
I've seen pretty much 50-50. So I usually version it because for my purposes, like demos, I want to have everyone see the code that is generated also on GitHub. And I like creating these jar files it's like a library. So your schema is kind of like a library to your application. But I also understand the vision where you don't want to version any generated code because it's a derived artifact. So they version only the delta, which is defined in Flyway or Liquibase, and generate the code every time in the build. So I think both models have merits.
Got it. That makes sense. Yeah, we're huge fans of both Flyway and Liquibase as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's very important to think about this, especially since when you're using jOOQ, you use this code generator, you have to think about all of this setup. So that's a little bit of project overhead at the beginning, which is massively paying off in the long run during the project. But this overhead in the beginning, you should really think about how to set up your continuous integration pipelines. And I think both of these aspects, both generation of jOOQ code, but as well as the database change management, is a very important aspect of how you build your project. And when you get that right, you have automatically free integration testing as well. So because you've already thought about all of these processes, there are no longer excuses of doing integration testing. Right.
Yeah, exactly. People ask us a lot about, what's the best way to do unit testing for code that talks to databases. I'm curious if jOOQ has an opinion about that. I guess you have something. Yeah. How are your tests running right now?
So it's not unit testing. I usually call that integration testing.
Sure.
I think it's not really a unit because when I test jOOQ, when jOOQ is being tested, it's done automatically as well. And in case of CockroachDB, we use the CockroachDB Docker image along with test containers. So test containers are really a fantastic product where you can automate these kinds of integration tests, which are very hard to automate otherwise. You can script your container creation and setup and the creation of the database and then population of the data and etc. So this runs all completely automated, and then it wouldn't be possible to develop jOOQ otherwise. I mean, jOOQ really has to be sure that every change jOOQ makes will still produce valid SQL on the 30 database dialects that jOOQ currently supports. So it really has to be automated and integration tested. But I do recommend that end users also use this approach, especially with test containers and Dockers. It's now really simple and fast.
People talk a lot about the test containers system, and they love it. I've never played with it. I probably should, but people are really into it these days.
You should. So I'll continue here. So there's one example I really want to show. I really love this example. So this is a kind of a new feature. I mean, joins, you would expect them to work the way they are, right? So it's just an ordinary join. But much more interesting than joins is something that SQL doesn't really have. So one of the things that SQL doesn't really have is implicit joining. So you see customers have addresses, have cities, and have countries. So these things are all 2-1 relationships. So a customer has one address. So you have a foreign key from the customer to the address, to the city, to the country, and the jOOQ code generator generates these path navigation things. So you can actually implicit join these things. When we run the query, we can see what happens behind the scenes. So we have the customer and the customer's country. And the actual query that's been generated here, you can see that customer is joined to address, which is joined to city, which is joined to country. And you don't have to think about all of these joins and join predicates. let me just quickly go to this setting here. We can actually have
you should add this to the official
SQL.
syntax of SQL and just call it like the,
Yeah, I know.
Lucas,
I want
the Lucas join or something. You know what I mean?
I mean, I can't take credit for this. I think it was already present in JPQL and Hibernate query language, and probably in others. I've seen it in a PHP ORM as well. It's kind of an obvious syntax, an obvious feature to do. I mean, I've even seen it in Microsoft Access, I think. Microsoft Access has something similar. Now you see that the formatted query, I just changed the flag, and you see the formatting of all this join graph here. And it produces the right inner or left join depending on your nullability of the foreign key. So you really don't have to think about all of these things anymore in many cases where you don't actually want to do that, right?
That's really cool. That actually, yeah. So this is kind of like more of a traditional ORM feature.
No, it's not an ORM feature. I mean, it's a SQL feature. I really think, like Jim said, this should be part of the SQL language. It could be. It's completely not orthogonal to the SQL language at all. It's a to-one join could be written in this syntax here. And in fact, databases that are OR DMS, like Postgres and CockroachDB, who know nested types, also have a similar kind of a way of nesting stuff. So you're kind of just nesting your to-one relationships, which is what I'm doing here, by the way. I'm not projecting any columns. I'm projecting tables directly. So you see, I'm getting this row expression here and then CockroachDB.
Oh. I see. Wow, that's actually that's melting my brain a little bit.
What?
That's very cool.
Row expression? Because
yeah,
you can
that's like that's how many characters, and then what does that blow out into? It's just amazing. I don't know. My religion is like, you guys, the stuff that's working on the data. It's if it's manipulating data to return some sort of response, that's DML, and that should be in the syntax. Like like why do this elsewhere? Like it's not going to be different in other languages. It's to be part of the syntax. Like
yes.
I mean, an ORM to me is like language specific things you need to do, like, and that's that layer. And then like you're going to do this in every one of those ORMs. So like, to me, it's just basically good. It's elegant code. Like put it where it needs to be, which is down below. Yeah.
But you see, even this feature here, where you have this nested row, it's really complicated to get right on all the database products. Yeah. So for instance, in CockroachDB, I'm generating this row here. In native Postgres, I can actually just put the table itself. I'm guessing that this, I've seen it as a feature request that you support this native syntax, which is just convenience. I've never seen it outside of Postgres. It's really convenient because it's the way people actually think, and that's one of the things why people use ORMs, because they want to map stuff to their Java objects. So they don't want to actually work with these records. They want to work with, for instance, a country record in Java and the customer record, which nests the country record, right? So this is something that jOOQ recently added, where you can just nest stuff like this. So you have, again, this whole path here. And then you have this little convert from, and you can map directly this country column, which is just a type string. So you see here, there's a type string here on the field. And when you convert it to another field, okay, IntelliJ doesn't show me I'm usually using Eclipse, so IntelliJ doesn't show me the type here. But the type will become a field of country. And now you see, when I'm compiling this, I can map all of this into this customer record in a type-safe way. So if I'm changing here, this is really magical, I think. If I'm changing here to a Boolean column, it will no longer compile on which level? This level here. Do you see it? Because I can't map a Boolean column into this first name customer column.
Oh, wow. That's very neat.
It does it recursively. So there's a type-safe recursive mapping of SQL data structures into Java data structures, which is even more magical if you're using, I'm showing, we don't have infinite time, so I'll have to skip a couple examples. So let me just quickly show this multiset example. Multiset is an operator from the SQL standard, which has been implemented in the standard form only in Informix. Postgres doesn't have multiset, but ArrayAg, which is kind of similar. Same with CockroachDB, but anyway, so multiset here allows me to, I'm projecting the film title. Now I'm only selecting from film. I'm getting the film title, and then I'm nesting this subquery here. And the nested subquery with multiset can allow me to return multiple records and multiple columns, right? So you see I have two columns here. So for each film, I'm getting the actor's first name and last name, and you can see there's multiple actors per film. So there's a film actor relationship table, And I'm using again this implicit join feature here. So jOOQ will behind the scenes generate the right joins, where I correlate everything to the film table and do the same thing with film categories. So there's two different many-to-many relationships between film and category and film and actor. And both of these relationships are nested with multiset. So this will return a type that is really a bit hairy. I will just quickly show it, right? So it's a result with three columns. The first one is the string here. The second one is a nested result with two columns, first name, last name. The third one is a result with one column. But we don't show this type. Usually we just use var, which luckily has been added in Java 9. And I'm displaying the result in the end as JSON and XML in this example, right? So I can format the result to JSON. This is a jOOQ feature. So I can just log this in a nice way. So now I'm running this. And behind the scenes, because CockroachDB doesn't have the multiset operator, almost no database product has, I'm running a query that emulates everything with JSONB to be specific. So the whole nesting is done now with a correlated derived table here, where we have the film actor table and the actor table. You see the implicit join here. This is the implicit join. And here's the correlation where we correlate the film actor table with the film table. And then we project the actor first name and last name. And then we aggregate all of this in a JSONB array, right? So this is just a serialization format. You will never see this JSON documented. We will just see the end result, which is a type safe nested result set. But behind the scenes, jOOQ has to serialize everything with JSONB in a kind of quite efficient way because it's an array of arrays. So there's not a lot of overhead here, which is what CockroachDB supports. And the second multiset is right here, the same procedure. Again, a JSONB array aggregation with the film category table. And that's the entire query, right? So it's kind of the same thing. It's just a different serialization format. When you print out the results, you can see the nesting. So the title is here, and here's a nested nested result set. The way that jOOQ debug logs it. So you see the first name and last name for each actor in a nested record, and then the categories.
Cool.
Or if you export all of that in JSON, you can see the JSON structure as it was serialized. I guess it's a lot of logging or XML. So this is done all automatically, and it's getting even better because you've seen the really unwieldy type that this produces, but we can again map everything into a nice Java structure because we want to have a record of type film with this string and the list of actors and the list of categories. And these are also Java objects, right? So the category is a name and the actor is a name. We nest this once more because we maybe want to reuse this name object. And we just use the usual primitives that I've shown before, convert from or mapping. I'm not going to go into the details of which one you have to choose each time. But in the end, you see, I'm getting this film record, right? So the whole structure here is nested recursively, and I'm getting a type safe result. So if I'm going here and typing film actor ID, right? So I could do this in the nested query, and I will see, okay, now this no longer compiles because this actor thing here, the actor doesn't expect me to pass both an actor ID and this name object. Right, so I have to go and fix my model here. Long actor ID, and now it compiles again. You see that?
Very cool. So as a developer using jOOQ, you're responsible for creating your own sort of model objects, right?
Yeah, you're probably doing that. You can use jOOQ's generated model objects, but you're probably using your own.
Got it. And how do you choose as a developer whether to use sort of this nested style that you've been talking about versus not using a nested style? I could see it can kind of go either way depending on what you're trying to do in your application, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the point here is, and that's what we want to stress it once more, that SQL, the language, is so powerful that you don't have to choose only one way, right? So it's just a bunch of operators, just like join. A join is an operator, a mathematical construct. This multiset thing is an operator. You can combine any sort of operator in a query and do the thing that you want to have. So for instance, in this case, I'm not assuming that you have to absolutely follow the structure. The structure probably emerges because someone told you, I want to have this structure in my API, right? So someone gave you those types. I need these types. Can you write a query for me? Or maybe you do it yourself. But the point is, you want to get to the structure in the end. This is what you want to have. Maybe you have a UI where you can have films, and then you have these nested collapsible items where you can open up the actors per film optionally, and you want to just eagerly fetch all that data, and then you create this data structure, right? So I guess the data structure is derived from a business requirement, and then you can write the query exactly to match this data structure, and you don't have to worry about mapping and about how many queries you run and n+1 problems. It's just, you can write a single query and just map everything to your data structure.
That's so nice. Another place where jOOQ helps you just by looking at your using the power of Java's type system, basically.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
And obviously, I mean, this is if you want to map to Java objects. If you want to just produce JSON, you don't use multiset. You use the original JSON. You can just write the DSL JSON array ag. So DSL is the API where you get access to all the jOOQ functionality, and you just write JSON array ag, and you use the native feature from CockroachDB to let CockroachDB produce the JSON that you need in the end.
That is cool. That is very nifty.
So yeah, I could go on for hours, right? So you tell me what else you want to see.
Well, we only have about 10 more minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's something small you want to show, Lukas, that's great. I do want to make sure like people do understand how to get started with jOOQ, or how to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if people are like, if somebody's not using it right now, like how do they get started using it, Lukas?
So you get started. There's multiple examples to get started. So for instance, this demo will be online soon, so you can just download it and then start playing with it. Otherwise, you go to the manual, and there's a tutorial how you get started. So typically it explains first how to set up the code generator against your existing database, because that's what you care about the most. So you want to have your existing, whatever your business is, and try some queries on that data model. You can point the code generator to that and start writing it. I mean, all you need when you get started with jOOQ is a JDBC connection, and that's it, right? So you can set it up like that. You wrap it in a configuration, and then with this CTX object, this is the entry point for the entire DSL. So you're pretty much set. You don't need any other libraries. You don't need Spring if you don't want to. You can just start like that with a JDBC connection.
And as come on, I'm a shill for Cockroach here, but you could actually spin up a CockroachDB serverless instance in seconds. You have the database, the whole thing kind of moving. But there was a question here. Actually, Sam asked, how does jOOQ integrate with reactive systems?
Right. So I don't have those examples yet. I've started doing that, but since recently, especially the folks around VMware and Spring, but there have been other contributors have created R2DBC. So jOOQ can also, if you see this DSL using object here, so you can go inside here. This always takes a little while in IntelliJ to open, because it's a lot of methods. But you can use a R2DBC connection and pass that to jOOQ, and jOOQ will just work reactively as well. This takes too long. Sorry. So for instance, a jOOQ query that we've seen here, if you go into what this select here is, yeah, that's great. So we have a result query. And the result query, it implements publisher, right? So we have a publisher, which is the typical Reactive Streams publisher. You can just use it as any publisher you want. So you use your Reactive Streams API, for instance, RX Java or a Reactor, and you pop in this jOOQ query in there, and it starts streaming the records to your Reactive Stream. But you do need the R2DBC support behind the scenes. So there's a Postgres driver. I've never tried it on CockroachDB. I'm not sure if it's ready yet. You folks maybe know?
Jordan, do you know?
I actually don't know.
I don't know either.
People think that there's been some interest in it. And I imagine people in the community might have probably tried this out and got things working, but I'm actually not sure off the top of my head.
Yeah. But even if it doesn't work, I mean, jOOQ can still integrate with the Reactive Streams API in a blocking way. So if it's a JDBC connection, it will block, but it will still, from the programming model point of view, it will integrate nicely with the Reactive Streams API.
Well, cool. Jordan, any other questions that you have top of mind?
I think, let's see, I guess, Lukas, if you had to name one next level SQL feature that you could just snap your fingers, every database should implement it, Or maybe on the other flip side, one SQL feature that developers should be using that you could just snap your fingers and they could use it and make their lives easier. Do you have something in mind for either one of those?
I think it's the ones I've shown. I mean, multiset and implicit joins, they're so powerful. And everyone starts using now JSON as a workaround for multiset, but I think multiset is part of the SQL standard. It's never been really popular, but I think this is what makes SQL really, really magical. If you could really nest in a type-safe way, not in a document-oriented way, any sort of data.
Cool. Thank you for that.
Jordan, I don't know. Your question's a little weird because snap your fingers. I think Thanos, and I'm thinking like, okay, I just got rid of half of the SQL dialect. Like it's just gone. The syntax is gone. Like we just don't have joins anymore. It's been part of the blip. Sorry, you've got to code all that. Sorry, buddy, but
I'm so culturally out of it. I've never even seen that Thanos movie. I've never seen it. I'm sorry. Really? I know people meme about it, but I just don't think of it.
That's awesome. So. Well, cool, Lukas. Thank you for doing this. Seriously, I'm thoroughly impressed. I kind of want to go and code right now. Like that was a lot of fun. The simplicity is just really beautiful. It's really elegant, buddy. So kudos. It's great. So
thank you.
And I think it's really easy to get started. I'm not gonna like dump a URL because y'all just search for jOOQ. It's one of the most like unique. You definitely got a unique URL, Lukas. So good job on that one too, right? So by the way, what is where did the name come from, by the way? Just I'm just curious. JOOQ.
It stands for Java Object-Oriented Querying, and it just describes that the whole API and the whole query model is an object-oriented model. It's kind of a dumb name in the end. It's just
it works.
You know, in the beginning, I had to put these two OOs in the name, and then they were I's in the first logo.
Yeah, well, it works. I don't know. I mean,
works, right?
For us, I mean, it's cockroach, dude. Do you know the questions that
I know.
I mean, what's in a name? You know,
yeah, right.
Love it or hate it, they don't forget our name. That's for sure. Like, you know, it's like
what are Cockroach Labs doing, right? So are they going to take over the world?
Well, it's funny. My first week at Cockroach Labs, we were the old office on 5th, Jordan. I was up there by myself, like, and the UPS guys showed up. And it was like 5:15, 5:30. Nobody was there, whatever. And the guy came to the front door. And I remember that old lobby, Jordan. It was really weird, janky. And he knocked on that glass door. And I was like, well, come on in. He's like, I'm not coming in there. I'm like, come on in. He's like, no, man, there's cockroaches in there. I'm not going anywhere. He was all like, oh, yeah. So that
could be worse.
We now have a building in Manhattan. And like on the front of the building, there's our logo. So I can only imagine what tourists think when they walk by. You know, right. Non-coding tourists, you know, it's our job to make sure people know what we do, but I think there's a world of anyway. So it makes sense to me. So, well, Lukas, again, thank you for doing this. Again, if anybody wants to get started with this, jOOQ.org is where you go to kind of learn and use and kind of check it out. I would ask everybody, please create a CockroachDB serverless database underneath this. It's just an instance of Postgres, basically, and you can basically do all these things on it. Everything that Lukas was showing just now. Building databases is not easy. Building distributed systems are also difficult, and I think the maturity of what you built, Lukas, I think is another one of those kind of key things that's really important here. You've been building for 11 or 12 years, right? Like, yeah, that's a long time. So kudos to you, and I think that's just one of those things that people need to take into consideration when they're choosing tools as well. Like there's a lot of new tools out there, like the maturity of them and the you know, testing in production and making sure these things work. It's rock solid at this point. Is that correct, Lukas? I mean, that's a fair assessment of jOOQ, right?
It's amazing. Yeah. I mean, all these relational databases, it's such a sound model. It's been around for 50 years. And the main differences these days is really optimization, right? So
yeah, and so I think like the entire like it's just a solid tool. Like you know, Jordan, kudos to you and the engineering team as well, because what we've built here at Cockroach Labs, the database itself, like the stability and like the reliability of the code base itself is just always improving. I think y'all building a database is not easy. Jordan, I don't know, you wouldn't even like comment on that because it just wasn't. I think I remember Ben Darnell saying something like, I could code Raft overnight in undergrad, but like doing it as a professional, as a like underneath, the corner cases kill you. And like maturity of databases are actually pretty important. So when talking to, the newer kind of distributed databases, make sure you understand the maturity and the problems and these sort of things. I think it's actually pretty important. Like use stable modern tools with stable modern tools. So
yeah, and from my point of view, I mean, integrating with the Postgres style dialect and CockroachDB has been really simple, and it's amazing. I mean, you didn't fork for Postgres, you rebuilt it. You're just compatible, and this is really impressive. Really impressive from the jOOQ perspective. And I have a lot of integration tests to hammer against the databases, and I don't think I've found a bug yet.
That's right. Yes.
I don't think.
I love it.
I don't think.
That's great. Yeah, we spend a lot of time doing testing. That's probably, I'd say, people say like you should be spending 50% of your time on testing. I think we're probably there. Testing SQL is really complicated. I could talk a lot about that. But
I would love to hear
it's a cool field.
So, all right. Well, thank you both. Honestly, thank you for getting me up so early. Whoever scheduled this at 5 a.m. because now I have like all day to do what I need to do. Like I have hours of time now. So. It's still not light here in Denver, y'all, but thank you, Lukas, very much.
Thank you as well.
Yeah, and thank you, Jordan. I'll talk to you later, buddy. So, and thanks everybody for joining.
Thanks, Jim, Lukas.